My name is Rebecca Morrison, and if you're hearing my voice right now, I need you to listen carefully, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about survival. I'm sitting in my car outside the FBI field office in Manhattan. In my purse, I carry a flash drive that contains enough evidence to send my husband, David Morrison, to federal prison for the rest of his life. But here's the thing, just 12 months ago I wasn't this woman. I wasn't sitting outside federal buildings with evidence of financial crimes. I wasn't plotting revenge. I was a wife. A trusting, loyal wife who believed in every word my husband told me. And I believed in him completely. We lived the American dream. A mansion in Westchester County with a pool that shimmered under the summer sun. A pair of luxury cars in the driveway. Vacations in Europe, photos on yachts framed and posted online like trophies. People looked at us and said, "That's the life. That's what love and success look like." David was a financial advisor with his own firm, helping families secure their futures, he used to say. His charm was magnetic, the kind of man who remembered birthdays, donated to charities, even cried at animal shelter commercials. That's the man I fell in love with back in college. 8 years of marriage later, I thought we were solid. We were even trying for our second child after losing one to miscarriage. I'll never forget how he held me after that loss, whispering promises that we would try again, that he would give me the family and the future we dreamed of. I thought I had the perfect husband, and for a while I believed I did. Every week we went on date nights, $200 per person dinners at the best restaurants in Manhattan. We flew to Europe every summer, strolling hand in hand through Paris like newlyweds. David gave me a monthly allowance of $3,000 just for shopping. And every winter we attended charity galas where David stood on stage, praised as a pillar of the community. Everyone admired him. Everyone trusted him. And so did I. But looking back now, I can see the cracks in the picture-perfect painting. Cracks I ignored because I wanted to believe in the dream. I remember one night in particular. We were at a charity dinner for pandemic relief. David gave this passionate speech about helping families who lost everything. The applause lasted for 5 whole minutes. He was the star of the evening. But later that night when we got home, something was different. We were lying in bed, and he was glued to his phone until 3 in the morning. His face was cold, hard, not the loving husband I knew. When I finally asked him what was wrong, he snapped at me. For the first time in our marriage, he raised his voice. "It's work, Rebecca. Someone has to pay for all this." He waved his hand around at our bedroom, the chandelier, the silk sheets, the life he had built for us. A chill ran through me that night. A whisper in my gut telling me something wasn't right. But love makes you blind. And I brushed it off. That Tuesday morning was supposed to be simple, sweet even. David had told me he'd be at the office all day, meeting with clients in Manhattan. I had no big plans, just errands and laundry, but I wanted to do something thoughtful. That's who I was, the kind of wife who left love notes in his briefcase, who showed up with his favorite sushi just to remind him I cared. So I drove into the city, parked in front of Morrison Financial, and walked inside carrying a bag of takeout and a heart full of good intentions. I thought I was going to surprise him. Instead, I surprised myself. The first sign was his secretary. Normally she greeted me with a big smile, offering me coffee or telling me how much she admired my shoes. But that day, her face went pale. Her hands actually shook when she saw me. "Mrs. Morrison," she gasped, jumping out of her chair. "What are you?" "David didn't tell me you were coming." I smiled, holding up the bag. "It's a surprise." She stammered something about checking his schedule, but I was already walking down the hall toward his office. That's when I heard it. Through the half-open door I froze. Inside, an elderly woman sat across from David. Her face was red, her body trembling, tears dripping into a crumpled tissue. "Mr. Morrison, please," she begged. That was everything we had. My husband's pension, our savings, our medical bills. How will we survive? Her voice cracked with desperation. I'll never forget that sound, a human soul breaking. David's response? He leaned back in his leather chair, sliding a stack of papers across his desk. His tone was flat, almost bored. "Mrs. Chun, I know this is difficult, but the market is unpredictable. These things happen. The investments you chose were high risk. I did warn you." Mrs. Chun clutched her chest, sobbing harder. But you said. He cut her off sharply. I wish I could help, but my hands are tied. You signed the paperwork. Her face collapsed in defeat. She looked so small, so powerless as she stumbled out of his office. And then, the moment that shattered everything I thought I knew about my husband. The second the door closed, David's whole demeanor changed. He picked up his phone, leaned back, and chuckled. Yeah, another one down, he said casually. These old people are so easy to manipulate. Fear of poverty makes them sign anything. I swear the room spun. My stomach dropped, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. This wasn't the man who held me after my miscarriage. This wasn't the man who cried at commercials. This wasn't my husband. This was a predator. A wolf in an expensive suit. And he was feeding off the weak, the grieving, the desperate. I stood in that hallway for 20 minutes frozen. My hands trembled so badly I had to clutch the wall to stay upright. I kept hearing his voice over and over. The cruel laugh. The callous words. I wanted to storm in there, to throw the bag of sushi in his face, to scream, "Who are you?" But I didn't. Because something inside me whispered, "Don't show your cards yet. Watch. Wait. Learn." So I turned, walked calmly back past the secretary, who couldn't even meet my eyes, and left. By the time I got back to my car, the sushi was warm and the wife I thought I was gone. When David came home that night, he kissed me on the forehead, asked how my day had been, and poured us both a glass of wine. He smiled across the table. "How was your day, honey?" I wanted to throw the glass in his face. Instead I smiled back. "Oh, just the usual. And mine." He sighed dramatically. Helping families plan their futures. Sometimes it breaks my heart, seeing what people are going through. I almost choked. The performance was Oscar-worthy. But I played along. I laughed at his jokes. I let him hold my hand, because now I knew the truth. And the truth was bigger than anything I could have imagined. That night, lying in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling and realized something. My husband wasn't just lying to me. He wasn't just cheating the system. He was stealing from people who had nothing left. From families like Mrs. Chin's, who had already lost so much during the pandemic. He was a parasite, and I was sleeping next to him every night. A lot of you are probably wondering, why didn't you say something right then? Why didn't you call him out? Here's the truth, I thought about it. God, I wanted to. But I also knew him. I knew how charming, how manipulative, how convincing he could be. If I confronted him without proof, he'd twist it. He'd make me question myself. He'd gaslight me until I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. So I stayed quiet. I smiled. I nodded. I let him think I was still his devoted wife. Because in that silence, something inside me hardened. I didn't sleep much that night. David snored softly beside me, dreaming his comfortable dreams, while I lay awake in the dark replaying every second of what I'd seen and heard. By morning, I knew two things for certain. My husband was not who I thought he was. If I wanted the truth and justice, I had to dig for it myself. The first few days were the hardest. Every instinct screamed at me to lash out, to rip the mask off his smug face. But instead I smiled. I made his coffee, kissed him goodbye. I pretended everything was normal. It was an act, but it gave me something priceless: time. While David strutted around playing the successful financial advisor, I began my own role, the quiet detective. One afternoon, when he left his briefcase at home, I felt my pulse quicken. Inside was his laptop. Normally, he was meticulous about keeping it with him. But that day, in his rush, he forgot. I carried it to the dining room table, shut the blinds, and opened the lid. Password protected. Of course. But what he didn't know was that his genius four-digit passcode. It was our wedding date. I tried it, and the screen unlocked. For a moment, I actually laughed out loud. The irony of it. He thought he was invincible, but in the end, it was his love story with me that cracked his fortress. First, it looked harmless. Spreadsheets, client lists, routine files. But buried deeper in the folders, I found encrypted documents. I didn't understand all of it, but some of the labels made my blood run cold. Offshore transfers. Shell accounts Cayman. Life settlement fund private. I clicked on one file and froze. It wasn't just random numbers. These were names. Elderly couples, widows, people who had invested their entire lives savings. Next to each name were amounts, hundreds of thousands of dollars, all funneled away into accounts they would never touch. And then the file that almost broke me. Insurance beneficiaries. First, I thought it was another list of victims. But then I saw my name. Rebecca Morrison. Beside it, payout $2.5 million. I sat there, my hands shaking, staring at the cold truth. My husband had taken out an insurance policy on me. Payout so large it made my stomach twist. And I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly was his plan for collecting it? As I was closing the laptop, I noticed something else in the briefcase. A leather-bound journal. Curiosity got the better of me. I flipped it open. It wasn't a diary. It was a playbook. Page after page detailed his strategies, how to exploit grief, how to pressure clients into signing, even how to fake empathy to earn trust. And there, in his own handwriting, a line that burned into my brain. People will trust you if you smile while you rob them. Flipping further, I found something I wasn't prepared for. Notes about a woman. Her name, Ashley Cooper. A younger client, recently divorced, wealthy but lonely. I didn't need to guess what that meant. My husband wasn't just a thief. He was a cheater too. The worst part? There were references to their future, scribbled in margins with disgusting little hearts. So not only was David planning to rob the innocent, he was planning to discard me like yesterday's trash. I snapped the journal shut and shoved everything back into the briefcase just before his car pulled into the driveway. My hands were still shaking when he walked in the door. "Hey, sweetheart," he said casually, kissing my cheek. "How was your day?" "Just boring house stuff," I lied, forcing a smile. Inside, though, something had shifted. I wasn't just a hurt wife anymore. I wasn't just a woman betrayed. I was a woman with evidence. And I wasn't going to let him destroy one more life. After what I found in David's laptop and journal, my world felt like quicksand. Every smile he gave me, every "I love you" sounded fake. Rehearsed lines in a play I hadn't known I was in. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once you see the cracks, you can't unsee them. And once you know someone's true face, pretending becomes both torture and weapon. I chose weapon. From the outside, nothing changed. I was still the doting wife, still cooking his favorite meals, still laughing at his recycled jokes. But inside, I was keeping score. Every word he said, every call he made, every late night at the office. I logged it all. I started carrying a small notebook in my purse, jotting things down under the guise of grocery lists. Times, dates, names. Little things most people would overlook. But little things add up. And the more I paid attention, the more the truth revealed itself. One Thursday, David claimed he was heading to a client dinner. He kissed my cheek, sprayed on cologne, and left in his black BMW. I waited 15 minutes, then grabbed my keys. Now, I'm not proud of how good I got at tailing him. But desperation makes you resourceful. I followed him across town, heart pounding, headlights dimmed just enough to blend in. He didn't go to a steakhouse. He didn't go to meet clients. He went to a trendy rooftop bar in Brooklyn. And Ashley Cooper was waiting for him. Seeing her for the first time was like swallowing glass. She was younger, maybe late 20s, with sleek blonde hair and a laugh that carried across the night air. David leaned in close, touching her hand as if they were teenagers in love. He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, carefree, boyish, alive. And for a moment the pain nearly knocked the wind out of me. But then I remembered the journal, the insurance, the clients he was bleeding dry. And my pain turned into fuel. Because Ashley wasn't just his mistress. She was leverage. Over the next 2 weeks I became someone I didn't recognize. I followed them more than once, camera phone ready. I snapped pictures of them holding hands, of David unlocking a hotel room door, of Ashley wearing jewelry I recognized from our bank statements. I collected receipts, screenshots, even hotel bookings that business trips didn't explain. I wasn't just building a case for myself. I was building one no one could ignore. The breaking point came at a dinner party we hosted for David's colleagues. Our house was full of laughter, the smell of roasted salmon, and the clinking of wine glasses. David was in his element, charming, confident, making everyone believe he was the golden boy of finance. But I saw it differently. I saw the wolf in sheep's clothing, telling jokes while his victims cried themselves to sleep. One of his co-workers' wives, a sweet woman named Linda, leaned toward me and whispered, "Rebecca, you're so lucky. David's one of the good ones." A real provider. I smiled politely. Inside, I wanted to scream. Lucky. If only she knew. After that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be the helpless wife who found out and quietly walked away. I wasn't going to let him destroy lives while mine sat in ruins. If David wanted to play games, I would outplay him. So I reached out to a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, someone who worked in compliance at a federal agency. I didn't spill everything right away, but I asked questions. Hypothetical ones. About fraud. About offshore accounts. About whistleblower protections. My friend's voice was careful, measured. Rebecca, if you know something, you need to be very sure before you act. Men like that don't go down easy. I swallowed hard. I know. And in that moment I realized I was already in too deep to turn back. Meanwhile at home I perfected my act. David would come home smelling faintly of perfume, and I'd say nothing. He'd talk about meetings that I knew were lies, and I'd smile, pouring him another glass of wine. Sometimes when he drifted off to sleep I'd just watch him. Not with love, not with hate, but with the cold calculation of someone studying an enemy. Because that's what he was now. My enemy. And enemies are meant to be defeated. If you want to take down a man who built an empire of lies, you don't do it alone. Predators run in packs. They have lawyers, quiet enablers, and layers of paperwork between them and the truth. I needed people who could move faster, smarter, and cleaner than David ever thought possible. So I started building a team. The first person I went to was Sarah, my sister-in-law. She'd never liked David. Honestly, her instinct always hummed something off about him. The way he smiled too long at family gatherings, the little digs he would make at holidays he didn't actually pay for. But Sarah had stayed quiet because family is messy and complicated. I called her one night and told her, "I need you to be brave." She cried for a minute, then she said the words that changed everything. "I've been waiting 35 years for this. Tell me what you need." Sarah was useful in ways I couldn't have predicted. She knew the family calendar, who trusted what, who owed favors, and most importantly, she had access to people David would never suspect. She became my quiet conduit to the world David hid behind. She unpinned the social web he hid in and quietly started to loosen the threads. The next person was Marcus, the link to the law. Remember Mrs. Chan? Her grandson worked in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. When I reached out, I did it carefully. I didn't send PDFs or flash drives over email. I met Marcus in a coffee shop in Manhattan, under the hum of fluorescent lights, and I slid him an envelope with copies of what I had found. He didn't smile. He didn't make small talk. He just read very carefully and said, "Mrs. Morrison, we've had whispers about Morrison Financial for months, but nothing concrete enough for an indictment. If what you're telling me is true and we can corroborate it, we can bring him down." He asked the kinds of questions only someone in his role would know to ask. Do you have bank statements? Offshore transfer records? Witnesses who will testify? And I answered as fully and calmly as I could without showing the tremor under my voice. Marcus was professional, but there was something else behind his eyes, a tired satisfaction that comes when a case finally has a pulse. He also made it clear. If I wanted to help, I'd be risking everything. He told me about whistleblower protections and the slow legal grind of federal cases. I nodded. I'd already made my choice. Then came Jennifer. The best divorce lawyer in New York. No, scratch that. The best divorce lawyer I could possibly imagine for the kind of war I was preparing to wage. Her retainer was $50,000. I remember the number because I laughed when she said it out loud, and I told her I'd take it from my husband's secret account. She didn't blink. Good. Clients hurt people in many ways. We don't just get you out. We get what's yours. And we make sure he doesn't use you as a scapegoat. Jennifer's role was surgical. She filed protective legal documents without alerting David. She set up trusts and emergency accounts in my name. She taught me how to preserve digital evidence so nothing could be deleted, and how to establish a paper trail that would look airtight in court. She was cold and efficient. Everything I needed. With Sarah, Marcus, and Jennifer in place, we sketched a plan. 3 phases, each designed to protect me and dismantle David's operation. Phase 1, legal protection. Jennifer filed for emergency separation under a confidentiality clause that protected my identity in financial filings and stopped David from accessing our joint accounts immediately. She drafted divorce documents and counseled me on what to say, and what not to say if anyone asked questions. Every interaction I had at home had to be measured now. Mr. Nice Guy had to think he was still in control. Phase 2, financial preparation. I, with Sarah's help, quietly siphoned small amounts into newly created accounts. Technically mine, so if David froze assets or tried to hide money in shell companies, I'd still have resources. Marcus coordinated with other agents to monitor suspicious transfers. Jennifer helped freeze accounts and begin the process of subpoenaing records which would later make the forensic accountants salivate. Phase 3, emotional destruction. This was the part one hated and loved at once. Reputation matters. For someone like David, image was currency. So we prepared the tools to remove that currency. We compiled testimonials, collected recordings, verified client statements, and packaged it into an exposé that would be impossible to ignore. Social ruin would be the surgical instrument that added pressure to the legal chokehold. People asked me later incredulously where I got the money to do this. The truth was ugly and poetic. I took it from him. David had millions hidden away. Shell accounts, properties registered in nominee corporations, and an opulence carved out of other people's suffering. It felt like stealing from a thief to fund us. We needed him to do what he always did best, talk too much to the wrong person. So we built the perfect trap. Sarah played her part like a pro. Through a series of carefully arranged introductions and half-truths, she planted the seed. There was a wealthy widow in the city looking for someone to manage a newly inherited fortune. Not just any widow, a convincing FBI asset who could play a grieving, lonely woman to perfection. I practiced my lines with Marcus and Jennifer until they were second nature. I rehearsed how to seem vulnerable without looking weak, how to ask for advice while nudging conversation toward investment opportunities. The FBI provided the widow, a middle-aged woman, polished, believable, with a story that would yank at any predator's heartstrings. She had $5 million to place, and she was exactly the sort of mark David would find irresistible. When Sarah called one afternoon and said, "He's agreed to a one-on-one meeting next week. He wants to fly her into his office personally," I remember the air rushing out of my lungs like someone had opened a window. This was it. 3 days before the meeting we picked our moment, our anniversary dinner. A table at that swanky midtown restaurant he loved, white tablecloths, soft lighting. He thought I was celebrating the marriage that made him look like a saint. What he didn't know was that I was wearing a wire. Marcus had fitted a tiny recorder under a brass button of my dress, its presence humming against my skin like a secret heartbeat. Jennifer had coached me on what to ask when, how to steer the conversation without seeming obvious. Sarah would slide the FBI widow into David's orbit, and if he bit, she'd steer him into more talk. The I can handle even the most complicated clients talk. The one that always betrayed him. I hated pretending to be naive. I hated laughing at jokes that once would have made my chest flutter. But the wire felt like armor. I kept my face impassive as waiters poured champagne and servers whispered, "Happy anniversary." David toasted me, his eyes bright like he had no idea what I knew. 2 nights later in David's office, the setup was flawless. The FBI widow, Mrs. Lang, looked completely distraught as she explained how she'd lost her husband and suddenly found herself with a fortune and nowhere to put it. David's voice softened in that way that had always fooled people. He reached across the desk and put a hand over hers. "He needs someone who understands," he said. "Someone who will protect his legacy." He smiled at me across the room and I felt bile rise. But the wire recorded everything. And what he said next was a confession that tasted like iron. "We've been very careful with clients like that," he said, leaning back. "You want to hear the truth? People are scared. They'll sign anything if you promise them security. We create the illusion of safety, fake portfolios, shell entities, and once the money moves, it's gone. Offshore. Untouchable." He laughed. A small casual sound that made the blood drain from my face. "Honestly, it's business. You can't be sentimental about money. The trick is to pick the ones who won't fight. The elderly, the grieving, the desperate. They're predictable." Hearing him say it out loud felt like watching him slice through lives with a precision I'd never imagined. It was worse than I'd feared. He described methods, timelines, even names of accounts that matched what I'd seen on his laptop. And then he said something that changed the scope of everything. "Tom's getting nervous," he confided, tapping the desk. "He thinks the FBI is onto us." I told him not to worry. My wife. She'd never suspect. No one would ever believe her over us. Tom. The name hit me like a fist. Tom Johnson, my best friend Sarah's husband, the one who'd consoled me after the miscarriage, the man who'd brought casseroles to our house and never missed a Sunday barbecue. My stomach flipped. Betrayal stacked with betrayal. When the meeting ended and the widow left in a black car provided by the FBI, David turned to me with a smug, satisfied smile. "That one's easy," he said. She practically handed her money to me. I kept my voice calm as I answered, dead on the surface. Good. Inside, my mind was a hurricane. That night, alone in our room, I replayed his words. Tom Johnson. Partner. My friend's husband. I thought of years of trust, birthday parties, shared recipes, late-night chats about kids, and realized I had been living inside a lie that spun between men who smiled and handed out crumbs of kindness. I couldn't breathe. The FBI had him on record. The wire captured the confession, the plan, the names. Marcus called me the next day, voice low and professional. "This is good. This is everything we needed." He explained they would expand surveillance, subpoena accounts, and, when ready, move in. But there was more for me to do. Marcus needed corroboration. More paperwork, more friends to speak up, more victims to step forward. So I kept tailing David. I kept photographing meetings. I kept collecting hotel receipts and credit card charges that tied him to Ashley and to Tom's shell companies. Each new piece of evidence felt like a nail driven into a coffin no money could buy him out of. He was arrogant and sloppy when drunk on his own confidence. He talked too much. He believed himself invincible. And invincibility is a dangerous drug. Finding out Tom was involved made the plan personal in the worst possible way. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about betrayal stitched into the fabric of my life. The night I learned Tom's name out loud, I sat at my kitchen table with a bottle of cheap red wine and a legal pad. I scribbled timelines, dates, dinners, and the names of everyone who had ever been at our house. Social circles overlapped in ways I'd never wanted to see. The people I'd trusted had intersected with the men who'd been destroying other people's lives. I ripped the page from the pad and walked it to the shredder, feeding it in slowly as if I were burning a bridge behind me. The thing about betrayal is, it rarely comes from strangers. It's always the ones close enough to know where your heart lives. Up until then, Ashley had been a ghost in my suspicions. Whispers, lipstick stains, unexplained absences. I thought she was just the mistress. Disposable. Replaceable. But after David's confession about Tom, Marcus sat me down with a folder. A grainy photo slipped across the table. David and Ashley in a downtown cafe, heads bent close. Not just an affair. Not just passion. They were planning. "She's not just in bed with him," Marcus said. "She's in business with him." Ashley wasn't a fling, she was a partner. The one running accounts offshore. The one pulling strings, laundering money, funneling cash through charities that never reached their causes. And she had a code name in their ledgers, R.A. Rebecca Anderson. My initials. When I saw that, something inside me snapped. The FBI could only move so fast. Warrants, paperwork, chain of command. But I was done waiting. So one cold Thursday night, while David was at a client dinner, I drove across town and parked 2 blocks from Ashley's loft. The kind of place bought with dirty money. Exposed brick walls, oversized windows, rooftop view of the city lights. My palms sweated through my gloves as I picked the lock. It wasn't elegant. Marcus had shown me enough tricks to get the job done. The door clicked open and I slipped inside. The air smelled like expensive candles and designer perfume. Everything about that apartment screamed curated perfection. Not a home but a stage. I didn't need the whole picture, I needed proof. On the glass coffee table sat a sleek silver laptop. The same model David kept in his office, the same password strategy he used for everything. Within 5 minutes I was in. And what I found made my stomach churn. Spreadsheets. Shell companies. Account transfers. Money routed through churches, schools, veterans' charities, siphoned dry before it ever touched the people it was meant for. Ashley's fingerprints were everywhere. She wasn't a side character in David's story. She was writing chapters of her own. And then I opened a folder labeled simply R. It wasn't numbers. It wasn't documents. It was me. Photos of me from the past 10 years. Smiling at barbecues, shopping at the farmer's market, holding a sparkler on the 4th of July. Some I didn't even remember being taken. But the captions underneath froze my blood. Weakness, emotional, unaware, gullible, will never suspect. Potential liability, monitor closely. Monitor. As if I were a project, not a person. At the bottom of the file was one chilling line. If she becomes a problem, she disappears. DJ will handle. DJ David Johnson. My husband. They had plans for me. For a moment I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. My vision blurred. I staggered back from the laptop, gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. All those years of playing the good wife. All those nights of pretending not to notice lipstick or strange phone calls. And here they were, cataloging my existence like I was prey. My first instinct was fear. Then came something hotter. Sharper. Rage. If they thought I was weak, if they thought I'd disappear quietly, then they didn't know me at all. I pulled out my phone and photographed everything. Every file, every transaction, every note about me. Each click of the camera was a promise. You will not bury me. As I closed the laptop and shoved it back exactly where it had been, headlights swept across the apartment. My heart stopped. Ashley. I could hear her heels on the stairs, the jingle of keys. For one sickening second, I imagined her walking in, catching me standing over her empire. I darted toward the fire escape, slipped out into the night air, and climbed down fast, breath hitching with every rung. By the time she unlocked her door, I was already 2 streets over, my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't stop driving until I was back in my driveway, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. That night I sat alone in the dark, staring at the photographs on my phone. Each image was a reminder of how close I'd come to being erased. They thought they could make me vanish like the money they stole. But I wasn't vanishing. I was going to burn their empire to the ground, brick by brick, lie by lie. And when I was done, they wouldn't just be criminals. They'd be exposed, humiliated, powerless. I whispered it into the silence of my kitchen like a prayer, like a curse. You wanted me gone. Instead, I'll be the one who ends you. By the time we were ready to move, everything felt surgical, cold, precise, and utterly unavoidable. Marcus had his warrants. Jennifer had her court orders. Sarah had done the social groundwork so that when the evidence went public, it would land like a bomb. I remember standing in my kitchen the morning they told me the date and feeling oddly calm, like a woman about to complete a long, terrible marathon. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't wobble. I had rehearsed this moment so many times I could have done it in my sleep. Phase 1 was public humiliation. And for a man who traded on trust, nothing kills profit faster than the public's disgust. I assembled the PowerPoint myself, a neat, merciless presentation titled, The Morrison Foundation's Real Impact. It had Mrs. Chen's photo, bank statements, wire transfers, recordings of David's own voice from the wire, screenshots from Ashley's laptop, and a list of shell companies with beneficiaries that led straight to Tom Johnson. I sent it out like a virus. To David's clients, the country club mailing list, his alma mater, the charity boards he sat on, our church community, and every social media account I could find tied to his name. I didn't sugarcoat it. The subject line read, What David Morrison Really Does for a Living. By noon, people I'd said hello to at Costco were messaging me, stunned. By evening, Morrison Financial had its reputation gutted. David called. He begged. He threatened. He emailed lawyers who'd never returned our calls. None of it mattered anymore. The narrative had shifted. People who had once regarded him as a pillar were now calling for answers. Sponsors dropped him. The club suspended him pending investigation. Invitations evaporated. Phase 2 was the financial and legal tightening. Marcus and his team moved like a trained orchestra. Subpoenas flew. Offshore accounts were frozen. Forensic accountants traced transfers to shell entities and charitable fronts. Jennifer was a bulldog in a courtroom I'd never cared to learn the language of. She fought in motions, established protected assets, and made sure every piece of evidence I'd risked my life for was admissible. On a gray Tuesday, federal agents walked through our living room with badges flashing. I showed them everything in my purse. The laptop copies, the wire recordings, photos from Ashley's apartment, screenshots of the Rebecca file. They didn't look surprised. They looked relieved. Marcus said quietly, You did what we couldn't without you. David was arrested in front of our house. I remember the look on his face. Incredulity, then fury, then a pale understanding. The handcuffs clicked. The nearest neighbor watched from behind curtains. Later, when I saw footage of him being led into a federal transport van, his suit wrinkled and his tie askew, there was no pity inside me. There was only the sense of a long tally finally balanced. Phase 3 is where I had the least joy. I'd built this part to hurt where he lived. Reputation, friendships, and the narrated life he'd sold the world. I put evidence into the hands of reporters. I testified quietly to boards and councils. Tom Johnson found his name in subpoenas and divorce papers. His wife left him. The same man who'd come to our barbecue wearing a collared shirt and sympathy found himself dragged through news cycles and the SEC's investigations. Ashley disappeared almost overnight. Someone tipped off enough people about her real identity that her former accounts went cold. Marcus later told me the FBI had eyes on her for months, and that my break-in into her apartment gave them the final corroboration they needed to tie her to multiple accounts of elder fraud. She was indicted. So was Tom. So was David. The legal web tightened until there was nowhere left to hide. 6 months later, while inventorying David's office under the watchful eyes of federal agents, Jennifer and I found it. A fake electrical panel that hid a steel safe. Inside were $2 million in cash and a folder marked with travel itineraries and a canceled passport application. Evidence that David had been planning to fake his death and disappear to South America, leaving me to take the fall. For a beat I felt dizzy. Anger flared hot and then seared into something like triumph. He had planned to vanish and leave me to answer for the sins he committed. He had the audacity to expect that the woman he'd catalogued as unaware would fade quietly. The audacity was deliciously ironic. I called Marcus. We photographed everything. The cash eventually went into accounts designated for restitution. The travel plans and passport applications were added to the federal file. This safe, the last shred of his bravado, became the final nail. After the trials, sentences, and restitution hearings, the noise faded. David was sentenced to years in federal prison. Tom faced charges and a public unraveling of his life. Ashley was convicted. Victims got partial restitution through settlements and the fund I helped set up. It was never perfect, but it was more than nothing. For many, like Mrs. Chun, it was a lifeline. I didn't remarry. I started a nonprofit. A quiet thing that helps financial fraud victims navigate legal minefields and reclaim what they can. Mrs. Chun volunteered there. She hugs me when we cross paths. Her gratitude is a kind of absolution I never expected to need. I sleep now with a different kind of peace, not from naive trust, but from a hard-earned certainty that I did the right thing. David writes me from prison sometimes. His letters are a mix of denial and thin, bitter flattery. "You were always clever," he wrote once. He still thinks I ruined his life out of spite. He doesn't understand that I didn't destroy anything. I prevented him from destroying dozens of lives. I won, yes, but the victory was expensive. Friends left. The neighborhood gossiped. There are nights I miss the simplicity of a life without constant vigilance. I mourn the woman I could have been if I'd never discovered the truth, and I honor the woman I became because of it. The price of justice is not always pretty.